Bitcoin has finally made it to the mainstream. It's crossed the chasm, as I like to say. Cross the chasm. What does crossing the chasm mean? Well, crossing the chasm is a term that we use to look at technology adoption. You might have seen this chart before. It's sort of like a bell curve. And it shows how new technology, such as the telephone and the color TV, the washing machine, the internet, and Bitcoin, things like that, new technologies reach adoption. And basically, they follow a predictable pattern, which you hear me talk about quite a bit, technology cycles. But basically, you have the beginning part, which is the innovators. This is the person who developed the technology. So the guys that wrote the code, that came up with the idea, et cetera. And typically, that brings to 3, 4 small single-digit adoption, right? Because not that many of them. After that is the next section that comes into this new technology, and these are called the true believers. So these are the guys that catch it early. These are the tinkers, the hobbyists, the ones that really believe in it. That would be me. I would put myself into the true believer camp of Bitcoin. And that typically gets us to about 15% adoption, maybe as high as up to 20% adoption. Then what happens, you see a big jump up in that bell curve. But before we get what's known as the early majority, and if you don't own Bitcoin yet, you can be part of the early majority. Before we get to early majority, there's something known as the chasm. And the chasm is a gap. And the gap has to be crossed. The chasm has to be crossed before the early majority comes in. And then after the early majority is finally the late majority comes in. All right, so the chasm is something that has to be crossed, and it's a mindset shift, right? Maybe there's a lot of people listening right now that think that Bitcoin is stupid, it's a tulip, it's magical internet money, I can't trust something that I can't hold in my hand, fill in the blank, I've heard it all. And it's a new technology. So, of course, not everybody believes in it. It's brand new. Well, not anymore. It's 15 years old. But, at the time, it's new. I don't know what it is. I'm a skeptic. All of these things, whatever your doubt may be about Bitcoin. But the chasm is where something changes. So the mindset of everybody will shift. Something changes where it gets very easy to use or becomes legitimate or something like that. So in the early days of the VCR, for example, there weren't really anything to do with the VCR. There weren't a lot of movies on the VCR. And the first use case of the VCR, like most tech, like the internet, was for pornography. And so obviously, that's especially back when the VCR came back, but even today, porn isn't really accepted in mainstream. Certainly it wasn't back then. And the only use case for the VCR was for porn, and so people overlooked the VCR. Why would we use it? We don't need that. There's nothing to do with it other than watch porn, etc. What brought the VCR into mainstream was Disney decided to release a movie on the VCR. When Disney released a movie, then other people started releasing movies. And once there was Disney and other good movies to get, then the mindset shifted and everybody went and started buying VCRs. Right? And we can go on and on about this. But this chasm, I believe, has been crossed. And I believe we've been getting across the chasm, if you will. But I think we've finally crossed the chasm now. We've crossed the Rubicon, if you will. And that is because this ETF has finally legitimized it. If you're a skeptic at this point, still thinking it's stupid, it's a tulip, it's a fad, it's going to go away, et cetera, I just don't know what else to say to you anymore. We have the largest asset manager in the world, BlackRock, which I'm no fan of, by the way. They're run by Larry Fink, so arguably one of the most powerful men in the entire world. He was on CNBC, and I've talked about this before. Now it's been a month or two ago. And he said that people are moving to Bitcoin for safety. So arguably one of the most powerful men in the entire world, runs the largest asset manager in the world, is calling Bitcoin a flight to safety. They've launched a Bitcoin ETF, and not just one, but 11 ETFs were approved. Not just one, but 11. The largest asset managers in the world, not just BlackRock. We're talking about like Fidelity and a bunch of other big ones. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about those in a minute. And now it's legitimate. Now, every financial advisor has the ability to now recommend Bitcoin into a financial portfolio. I talked about this before. I think 72% of financial advisors in a poll, 72% of them said that they would allocate money towards Bitcoin if an ETF got approved. So there you have it, 72%. That is That's at least the early majority. That might even be the late majority too. The chasm has been crossed. Bitcoin is easy. It's the best performing asset. It's been around for 15 years. It's certainly not a tulip. It keeps coming back over and over and over. It's now recognized by the largest asset manager in the world. It's approved by the government, and now everybody can buy it. It's a big deal. I have this prop on my desk here. I just want to show this to you. This is a block clock. It tracks the price of Bitcoin in real time. It lost power in March of 2022 when Bitcoin price was at 47,000. And I'm waiting to plug it back in until it gets over that price, which it should any minute or any day now. It's popped over that today a few times. It hasn't closed over that price yet, so we'll see where that's at.